All right. So if I can do you one big favour this morning, I'm going to reduce my sermon down to one sentence. Is everyone okay with that?
Does anyone believe that?
Well, no. You shouldn't believe that. I don't think either. So it's okay. My sermon actually is fairly short, but the reason for that is Helen's going to be sharing a story in the middle of that. So let me reduce it down to one sentence and start there. We are invited to live today with great expectations. Yeah? We are invited today to live with great expectations. Why? Because as God's people, we have a priceless inheritance kept secure in heaven waiting just for you. How good is that? All right? Now, I want to just suggest to you that in terms of our series, the search for identity, this is probably one of those things that God's people want to get a grasp on. It's one of those things that you want to, set your eyes on. And I would suggest to some extent you've got to base your identity on this. Okay? This probably can be boiled down to two things that I'm just going to explore a little bit this morning, just after Helen shares. Number one, you need to get a right perspective about eternity if you ever want to know what it is to live in and have a clear picture of what life is going to be today. Like, you've got to have an understanding about where you're going if you want to be able to invest in the here and now. Okay? So you've got to have a right perspective of eternity. And number two, you've got to embrace and learn to persevere as you wait. And Dave's already shared this morning some of the journey of waiting and the journey of the uncertainty of all that sort of thing. So like I said, my part this morning is actually pretty simple. I just get to put together Helen's story after she shares it. So where's Helen? Come on, Helen, let's go. So as Helen comes to share, I've asked her just to put into words a bit of a story about what happened to her last year, because I could sit here and explain this to the best of my ability for the next 10 minutes, but I think Helen can actually do it better, and then I can just tie the pieces together at the end, I hope so.
Thank you, Steve, for the opportunity to share this very strange story in a way. There's a really old hymn that I'm constantly quoting, at least part of it, and you probably recognise it. God moves in a mysterious way, his wonders to perform. He plants his footsteps in the sea and rides upon the storm. Is your God like that? Yep. And the last line reveals a lot. The last line of that hymn says, "He is his own interpreter, and he will make it plain." And I'm sure, like me, you've had many occasions where you're asking for the answer. Why did that happen? And to know that when the time is right, God will reveal to you. So in May, I had a phone call. You have to bear with me for the first part of this so that you get the whole story. The phone call was from the president of the New South Wales Board of Veterinary, whatever. And it was celebrating its 100th year in New South Wales, and the government was going to award 25 medals for people that had done significant work for the state. And the occasion was going to happen in June, and Darren, my son, and Megan, my daughter, who's here this morning, were invited as well. So when the time came, for those of you that didn't know Bruce and don't know the situation so well, it was only 3 months since he died, and we were really in a bad place in grief. at that time. It was very painful. And as well as that, we had the flu coming, and Darren had bronchitis, and we were a sad little group that left Melbourne that morning. It was a very dressed up affair, very formal. They said it was going to be a government house, and the occasion was in the library, a very big room. And everyone that was there was probably about 100 people, and I recognised a lot of them. And so everything got underway, and there was 3 VIPs giving a speech first, and then there were the presentations. When the presentations began, there was a big board, and a larger-than-life photograph of each person was placed up on a wall, and their name. And there was lots of clapping, and everyone was very excited after each award. And it got down to the third, 3 left. And I kept looking at this long staircase and wondering how I could make it up there to the stage. And they announced Bruce Christie, and I looked up at the board, but wait, it wasn't Bruce. It was a different picture up there, a different photograph. And the middle name was different. And I didn't know what to do. I had to think very quickly and decide what to do. This was something I didn't know what to do. But then in this big room, in this library, eventually a little weak voice, which was mine, came out and said, "There's been a mistake. It's not my husband." And very quickly they finished off the procedures there. And then there were 5 board members looming down onto me saying, "What happened? Why didn't you go and accept the award for your husband?" And I said, "It wasn't my husband." And they were confused, and I was confused. Nobody knew what had happened, but certainly there'd been a mistake. Well, my brain at least was still working, because then I realised from way back somewhere I was aware that there were 2 Bruce Christie's vets. And this is the only solution they had. So we ran with that. And there were lots of questions asked, and yeah, that was what happened. It was the other Bruce Christie that was to get the award. So a friend of ours had received a phone call from the board member to say, "Have you got the phone number of the wife of Dr. Christie?" And that's what happened. He gave the wrong phone number. So after that, they'd offered a gourmet lunch afterwards and everything, but for us, it lost its appeal. And we were ready to go. We were confused, and so were the board members, and they were embarrassed, and so was I. But anyway, we found our way out of the building and went into the rush hour, and it was very wet and cold in Sydney at that time, to find our way back to my sister's where we were staying. Well, Darren and Megan had to go back to Melbourne the very next morning, just with the promise of, "We'll be in touch." Just give me a minute. Well, after they left, I went into a poor me feeling sorry for myself at my sister's. And for 3 days, I kept it up. Now, I thought I was in pretty good company because I know that Abraham and Moses, they gave God a hard time every now and then too. And I didn't do it often. I know none of you would do that. But I started off, what was all that about? Why did we have to go through that? Weren't we suffering enough with the grief? Couldn't we have been given a bit of notice that that was going to be happening? And after 3 days, I thought, well, maybe it's time I listened. And God thought it was time I listened as well. And he did speak. It wasn't an audible voice, but it was very imprinted on my mind. And the first thing he said was, look up. Look up. Get to know my heaven. He said, my heaven. Get to know my heaven. He kept repeating it. Get excited about heaven. Talk to your friends all about heaven, particularly in church. Talk about heaven. And I was starting to get the message. One thing he said about heaven was that you only know earth right now. That's all you know. But when you're in heaven, heaven will become more real to you than earth ever was. That was an eye-opener. And he kept saying, look up, look up. And in 1 Corinthians 13, now we see imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in a mirror. But then we will see everything with perfect clarity. All that we know now is partial and incomplete, but then I will know everything completely, just as God now knows me completely. So then God spoke again, and he said, you can leave behind all your medals and certificates. Such things have no value here. Well, I knew that, but to hear it like that was different. I look at your heart. For the free gift of salvation given to you by my son Yeshua at the cost of his blood. He used the word Yeshua. It's the Hebrew for Jesus, and it means salvation. Bruce always knew he was a child of God. He knew he was a child of God, but he also knew that he was a friend of God. And he was a very humble man and a very learned man. And while I was thinking of Bruce in relation to this award, when I spoke to the man that had given out the wrong phone number, he said, you and I know Bruce's sense of humour. He would be laughing at what just happened. And I said, well, I agree with you, but right now we're not laughing. And I became aware right then that God was lovingly testing me and revealed that I had pride in my heart. And I remember learning years ago what you do if you've got what you do to pride, and you have to humble it. And I thought, but that's what's just happened to me in Sydney. I have just had my pride humbled. Couldn't have been much more humbling than it was. And then I started to look at things a different way, and I thought, surely did God go to all this trouble to teach me more of his ways, that I could walk in his paths, and I could receive the inheritance that he's been storing up for me, the hope that I'd longed for, Our hope is in God, and He is there waiting till it's our turn. So we need to look up and to talk about His heaven. I found many books, some in our library here. Billy Graham's written a book on death, and David Pawson, and many. You can learn many more things going to the Bible. Well, after some weeks, we were still coping with our grief, which has been very difficult. But in the post one day came a medal with Bruce's name engraved on it. And that reading that we had was talking about gold and silver. It still has to be refined in the fire. And I didn't know whether to laugh or cry when this came. And I thought, well, Bruce doesn't need it. He had plenty of medals anyway. He didn't need it. But I could use it as a reminder that every time I saw it, I could just know that this was God's way. And I contemplated further about what God does to help us to grow and how important it is. I thought that was a lot of effort for God for one person to. I must have had a lot of pride, but that's His way. He loves each one of you so much that He would put a lot of effort, if need be, into your growth and your love for Him, increasing your love and your knowledge of God. And I've been studying a bit more about the inheritance. And this is the hope that we have. Many of you for years have been putting your hope in when you'll be in His heaven. He kept calling it His heaven. And that is what we're hoping for the fulfillment of our hope. And that is the inheritance that God is offering for us. I have actually left out quite a lot, but I think that's enough. And the reading that Steve chose this morning is really a very timely word, I think. And I read somewhere an old preacher, Dwight Moody, here it is. If you want to be miserable, look within. If you want to be distracted, look around. If you want to have peace, look up. And when we start to look up, it's a different perspective that we're looking at. And also, I'll just finish now with maybe I'll finish anyway, because I can't find the end of it. But I think you get the message. I hope you get the message. Thank you, Steve.
So let me just try to tie that together, if it makes sense. Peter's first lesson here is this. Number one, you've got to live with a proper grasp of life ultimately going to eternity, and live with the proper perspective of what's going on here. Okay? We can easily reduce life down to this whole list of what do I want? The human search for fulfillment, the human search for happiness. Contentment in the pursuit of awards, a better name for yourself, a bigger share portfolio, more letters after your name, whatever your chosen pursuit is, right? And I'm not suggesting that those things don't have any importance. Okay, those things are in fact nice, but they are not the bigger story of life. Okay, because it's school holidays, let me share it this way, because this actually works really well for. Does anyone remember? Any of the kids here remember Lightning McQueen from the movie Cars? My son over here is the for parents who had boys. And for parents who have watched this movie, I think approximately 200 plus times, I have a fairly good knowledge of this. Lightning McQueen is this young punk racing car who is trying to get a name for himself, and he's trying to win this Piston Cup championship. And winning one of these cups is what he wants to do. This is why he exists. He ends up in the movie in this little town called Radiator Springs. He causes himself some trouble. He gets locked up. He damages the road. The judge, whose name is Doc Hudson, orders him to. His sentence is to fix the road, which is this old rickety, terrible, road. And so he finds himself stuck in this small town, whinging at his circumstances while he can go win this amazing championship, and then I'll be incredible, right? And one day, there's a scene in the movie which I couldn't show on the screen, where Lightning, in disgust, kicks this can into somebody's shed, and it ends up being Doc's shed. And he walks in there, and there, up in the shed, there are these 3 empty Piston Cup championships. Up there gathering dust. Some of them are holding tools and other paperwork and junk and everything else. He finds out that Doc is actually the famous Hudson Hornet who apparently had won championships, years and years and years ago, and is now living in obscurity. And McQueen says to him, I can't believe I didn't see it. You're the famous. You've got to tell me all your gifts. I can always remember this word for word because it's so ingrained in my head. And Doc's reply to him, with such wisdom and insight, was this: all I see is a bunch of empty cups. Now, maybe he just got old, maybe he got a bit crusty, maybe he got a bit cynical about what he was doing, but here's the point. He realises that all those achievements we often set our lives after don't bring the happiness and satisfaction that you think they will. Yeah? Peter here is inviting us, I think, to base our identity on a story that's far bigger than just our story. He talks about, it's the story of a creation, lovingly made by a God, to know and enjoy Him forever, but who hopelessly mess it up because they want the freedom to pursue their own definition of happiness, right? We know today that Jesus, as God's Son, comes to earth to rescue or save us from a life pursuing our own happiness. We know that He comes to invite us back to a life lived for His kingdom rather than ours, and ultimately to point us towards a promised eternal inheritance where there is peace, security, restoration, and the happiness that you're after. That's where we're going. Okay? So Peter here is saying, don't make your life whatever you reduce it to and whatever you're trying to search it for. But find your path. Find your life in the largest, grander story of redemption, where you have been gloriously saved by a God who loves you and entered human history to redeem this world once and for all. That's a place you find your identity. That's the place you find what really matters. Helen just told us a minute ago that God's word to her was, in the season, I reckon, of incredible disappointment, was look up. Why? Because when you look up, you suddenly get a far better picture of what this life's all about, and you get a far better perspective about what really matters in the here and now. Maybe I could reduce it all down to just what Jesus said, hey? Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Second point, quickly. If eternity with Jesus is the ultimate goal, then we've got to learn to persevere in the here and now. We have to learn to see whatever temporary challenge or burden life might bring as we wait for this eternity that Jesus says is coming. The passage there before said this: there is wonderful joy ahead, even though you must endure many trials for a little while. Helen's trip to Sydney on a human level must have seemed like a profound waste of time. Unless God wanted not to discourage her, but unless God had a bigger message for her that maybe would shape her life for the future and maybe would help us with ours as well. I said this recently in another message on generosity, but it really depends what you have your eyes on, doesn't it? It really matters what you have your eyes set upon, because if your eyes are set upon and fixed on your own pain or fixed on your own trial or fixed on your own situation, then that's what you're going to notice. That is the thing that is going to become primary for you. That's the thing that you're just going to keep living towards and trying to fix and everything else. Okay? But if you live with one eye set today on the glory of where this life is going, the temporary things of today just don't have the same impact. And all of a sudden you start focusing your lives on others, which is what, let's face it, Christianity is an others-focused religion. There's nothing about us in it. It's a transformed heart with a transformed sense of mission. That's what God's trying to do. One of the famous passages about perseverance in Hebrew is Hebrews 12. I won't read it there, but I think it's really interesting that what happens there is it links perseverance or endurance. I think it calls it, to a huge crowd of witnesses. Now, here's my point: that there is, regardless of what the world tells to you and says to you, there is nobody in that huge crowd of witnesses gets through life without having to learn to persevere. There is an essential connection between the huge crowd of witnesses and the need to persevere. Okay? And the invitation to persevere, put really simply, is an essential for all of us. We're all going to have to learn to do it. The only way you learn to persevere in this life, and the only way you finish well, is to keep your eyes set on where you're going. So one more thought as we finish this morning, and maybe specifically as we cast our mind towards next weekend and Easter. The verse said, we live with great expectation, for we have a priceless inheritance, an inheritance kept in heaven for you, pure and undefiled, beyond the reach of change and decay. I want to tell you this morning, there are two things our world gives you: change and decay. That ultimately is the picture. Despite all its promises, those are the two things that life in this universe brings. Change, and it might badge it up as something amazing and something, as though like change is a welcome constant. But you know what? What we already realise today is that everything ends in a pile of rubble. That Piston Cup championship, that award and everything else ultimately stands for nothing in eternity. Everything we like, everything we have has an expiration date to it. Okay? And I sense just saying that, the message could very, very easily be, well, what is there worth living for? Well, let me tell you. Here's the message that only Jesus can bring that is central to life this Easter. Where all human life, because of sin, might inevitably end in death, decay, and ultimately demise. Jesus can still today breathe life. He can breathe his Spirit. He can breathe the promise of eternal glory. And he can send a priceless inheritance into your life today and into your future tomorrow. If you will turn to him and take it. There is life to be found in Jesus, and all you've got to do is reach out and touch it.
Amen.
Don't reach out and touch it. Take it. Live it. That is the hope, my friends, of Easter. Hope is at hand. Jesus is real. So Peter's message today is, oh, that we might learn to live with a right perspective of eternity and what that means for today, and that we might learn to persevere as we wait with great expectation for what the Lord is doing. With all that said, let me invite Ray to come lead us in prayer.